Hey everyone, I'm Andy Picker. Welcome and thanks for joining me at Guitar Interactive magazine. I'm taking a look today at the SPL Crimson Audio Interface. Now, SPL is a German company. It stands for Sound Performance Lab. They've been around for quite a lot of years now, and they have made a lot of interesting, typically analog gear over that period of time. Things like the famous Transient Designer, which they came out with, but they also make really quite high-end preamps, mastering compressors, routers. They make attenuators for guitar cabs, and they make one of the best-selling budget line valve preamps that I've ever come across. A very, very good SPL Gold mic. So they know how to make high-end gear, and they also know how to manufacture to a level. When the box arrived with the Crimson, which you can see sitting just behind me here, when I opened the box, it was one of those strange things. You know, sometimes you get something and it's boxed up and it kind of feels like it's a certain weight, and when you take the thing out of it, the thing itself seems heavier than it did when it was in the box. And that kind of struck me with the Crimson. So first of all, you can see it's a decent size for an audio interface. You know, it's not one of these little tiny subcompact things. It's a desktop format, lots of space around all the controls on it. But when I took it out of that box, I thought this thing really does seem to be quite heavy. And I put it on a set of scales, and it weighs in just over 2.8 kilos, which is what, six and a bit pounds. So when you get this thing with all the leads plugged into it, it's certainly not going to be kind of tilting back and dragging over and falling off the desk for you. Now, it's designed to work, it's a USB interface, and it's designed to work with PC and Mac. And also, if you've got the optional camera accessory kit, you can use it with your iPad. But I would suggest that at the size of this and the weight of it, it's probably not going to be best suited for something that you'll throw on top of your iPad in a bag and go off first, you know, sort of distant location recording. You might want something a little bit smaller than that, but certainly if you are looking for something that's got high quality and that's designed, you know, this looks like a piece of vintage studio equipment to me. It's got that kind of heft of something that's designed to be put in place, connected up, and then just use an awful lot. So reviewers love to tell us that pieces of kit appear to be bulletproof, you know, great heavyweight construction, bulletproof, bombproof, and so on and so forth. But this really does have an absolutely sort of solid feel to it. And one of the things that I'll quite often do with a new piece of kit is give the various controls a bit of a wiggle, see how much play they've got. Now, that's by no means conclusive, and you get some very, very high quality potentiometers which have actually got, you know, some play built into them. It's just the way they're made. But interestingly, the knobs on this thing do nothing but tone. They've got absolutely no movement that I can discern in them at all. So it certainly seems to be borne out that it's built to a standard, and it's got a little label on it that tells us that, yep, it's actually manufactured in Germany, which, you know, may or may not mean anything to you, but I kind of quite like the fact that a manufacturer actually makes things where they're based. So, you know, good one SPL on that. Okay, taking a bit of a more detailed look at the front panel. On the input side, you've got two sets of channels with gain controls for microphone and instrument. And the way this is set up is that you have two microphone preamps, which clearly you're going to control using the microphone gain knobs. You've got phantom power individually switched for each one, and a gentle first order low cut or high pass filter. Now, this isn't the most robust filter that you'll ever come across, but it's gentle enough that you don't really have to kind of agonize over, is it going to take too much out of my signal? If you want a bit of low cut, turn it on and it's really unlikely to do any damage. Given that most microphones, or given that many microphones have built-in filters anyway, and that certainly the software that you're using in your DAW is going to have any number of filters, it's probably a fairly decent sort of decision to have made. So individual phantom power and low cut on each channel, individual gain for each microphone. Now, if you have your microphones plugged in and then you plug a line input into channels 1 and 2, what you'll find is that the line input will override the microphone, and you see that there are no level controls for the line inputs. That's because the line inputs are fixed at unity gain. The unit has good headroom, and basically what you get out is what you put in. Now, that's channels 1 and 2, which have the microphone inputs on them. Channels 3 and 4 give you the option of line or instrument. And if you plug an instrument into the sockets on the front edge down here, that will override what you've got set for the line. So again, the line inputs have no gain controls, they're just fixed at unity. And then the instrument gains are set on these knobs down here. On the right-hand side, you've got your output. So bearing in mind that this is actually a USB audio interface and monitor controller. So headphone 1 and headphone 2, the sockets are on the front edge where you want them down here. A monitor mix, and this sets the balance between what you're hearing from the inputs to the unit and what's coming back via USB from your DAW, and then the large, easy to grab volume control, which operates in the analog domain where it's supposed to, so you can turn the level down without actually sort of degrading the signal, which is what would happen if you did that in the digital domain. 4 sets of meter ladders here showing you signal present -6 dB and overload. You don't want the overload light coming on, obviously. It would always be nice to have a few more levels of indication, but in the real world, if you set up so that your ladder passages are just lighting up the -6 light, and then step it back just a little tiny bit from there so that you're not getting that coming on, the unit is plenty quiet enough that you're not going to be getting a load of noise generated, and that will leave you plenty of headroom so you don't have to worry about clipping. So that actually works quite well. Little set of indicators for power, host hookup, and MIDI in. Yes, it's got MIDI connectors on the back. And then you've got this sort of almost like inverted triangle of buttons in the middle, which control what inputs get fed through to the monitor outs. What these do is you've got your analog input choices, so pair 1 and 2, pair 3 and 4. Now, there's some fairly clever routing built into the Crimson, so that if you are using, for instance, a set of line inputs, if you're using 2 line inputs at the same time, the unit will figure them as a stereo pair and put one to the left bus, one to the right bus on the out. If you've got a single line in, it'll know that it's to be treated as mono and pan it down the middle. Likewise with the microphones, if you're using 2 mics, it'll pan them. If you're using just 1 mic and you want to put it down the center, then you've got the mono button here, which will do that for you. DAW returns gives you your pair, so you can set up 2 different mixes coming back from your DAW, select which you want to use there. Then sources. Now, sources is something in addition to the analog inputs which we've talked about. So we've talked about the mic, the line, and the instrument input. Sources gives you an extra set of sockets on the back with individual trims where they're needed on a pair of balanced jacks, a pair of unbalanced RCAs, and a mini jack. And these can be used for plugging in a talkback mic. You might want to put in a CD player, plug in a phone or an iPod, something like that. So you can plug those into the back and then select which you want to use using these buttons. Digital in, SPDIF, yes, it has a digital connectivity as well on a pair of RCA type SPDIF connectors. And then the speakers mode touch at the bottom. Dim is the only kind of extra function that you get for the monitor controller, so there's no collapse to mono and there's no mute, but dim knocks something like 20 dB off the output, handy if you want to have a conversation over it without constantly readjusting the level control. And then we've got this thing called artist mode. So what that does is this. If you are working on your own as the engineer, if you're mixing, if you're doing whatever you need to do, if you're recording, you will perhaps have artist mode turned off, and you'll just use the thing as you've got your set of input channels and you've got your DAW returns with your main mix on channels 1 and 2. Now, of course, what you can do is you can have a separate artist mix. So if you imagine, for instance, that you were recording a singer, you might want to be monitoring the whole mix as it's done, whereas the singer might want to hear more of themselves with some comfort reverb and compression added on there. So in artist mode, we effectively split the monitoring into 2 halves. So half 1 gets speakers, what do they call them? Speakers, no, speakers A and headphone 1. That's the engineer's side. So that gets you your DAW returns 1 and 2. And if you go into artist mode, you then split out headphone socket 2 and speakers B, so that the artist gets to hear the mix, the Q mix that you set up for them. If you, as the engineer, want to hear what the artist's hearing, you simply switch out of artist mode and you hear the Q mix. And if you want the artist to hear what the engineer is hearing, you simply switch in A to B, which feeds the outputs from speakers A into speakers B. It sounds like something like quite a bit to get your head around, but it's one of those interesting little quirks that actually makes life very, very easy. Once you've got your software routing set up, the hardware routing is there just at the push of a button to do what you need it to do. Okay, let's have a very quick look and see what the back panel's got to offer. Okay, one of the first things that you notice here is that everything is labelled twice. So you've got these labels which you can read the right way up, and then you've got another set of labels upside down. And the thinking behind those is that when you lean over the unit from the front and you're trying to figure out where you're up to, you can actually read those labels. I think it's a great touch. I think everybody should do that. So what do we've got? We've got USB in. Here's an interesting one for you. You do not get a USB cable in the packaging. According to the marketing material, it's sort of a green thing that SPL does on the basis that you've probably got USB cables anyway, and how do they know what length you need? Make up your own mind if you think that's a good thing or not. You've got the power input. There's no option to use bus powering on the unit. Sockets for SPDIF in and out and MIDI in and out, always quite nice to have. And then we've got speakers A on balanced XLRs and speakers B on balanced TRS jacks. And I don't know if you can see clearly there, but right and left trim, so that you can just get the levels of those speakers set to balance properly. The source sockets here are the ones that we spoke about when we looked at those switches on the front panel, where you've got balanced TRS left, right, unbalanced RCA left, right, and that 3.5mm stereo jack for if you want to plug your phone in. The levels, the trim for the RCA and the mini jack, there's a set of switches on the base of the unit. I'll show you that in just a second, which you can use to actually set the trim levels on these to sort of get the gain to where you want it to be. And then we've got line inputs there on balanced TRS, and we've got the mic inputs there on XLR. And that's basically it. So if we just take a very quick look at what we've got on the bottom of the unit, and there you go. There you can see again, solid metal construction, and there's your small set of dip switches for setting those source gains. And the only other thing that you've got is along the front edge, if you can see there, you've got your pair of instrument inputs and your pair of phone outputs. Okay, so that's what it does, the SPL Crimson USB audio interface and monitor controller. I rather like this. I still think it's got a bit of an old school vibe about it. It's got that feeling that, you know, you're going to put it there and it becomes a part of the institution, it becomes a part of what you're doing. It doesn't follow the modern ethos of being super small and super light, but it's got a heft and a ruggedness to it. It seems to work very well. It's got a few little design quirks about it and a couple of sort of clever little things, which is what we probably expect from SPL. You know, they are one of those companies that seem to take what they do and think about it and maybe put into place something. Carl, what about if we did this? Bits that other people might ignore. I like this unit a lot. Have a look at the specs, see if it does what you want it to do. If you like the look of it, maybe give one a try out if you're in the market for a USB audio interface. Just worth mentioning, whilst this one is a kind of deep grey colour, on the marketing materials, a picture of one in white, which looks absolutely gorgeous as well. Okay, anyway, Andy Picker, Guitar Interactive Magazine. This is the SPL Crimson. Take care. See you next time out.